The divorce papers landed on the kitchen table at 6:47 in the morning. Voss knew the exact time because the microwave clock was the only thing in the apartment that still worked reliably. The heater had been rattling since November. The bathroom faucet dripped all night, and the ceiling fan in Emma's room made a sound like something dying every time it turned. He'd been meaning to fix all of it. He never did. "Read it," Renee said. She was already dressed, full makeup, the kind she only wore when she had somewhere to be that mattered. "I had my lawyer draw it up last week." Voss didn't reach for the papers. He stood by the counter in the same gray t-shirt he'd slept in, a coffee mug in his hand, and looked at his wife of 9 years standing in their kitchen like she was already somewhere else. "Rennie, don't." She crossed her arms. "We've had this conversation. You know exactly where we are." He did know. That was the thing. He knew precisely where they were. What Renee didn't know, what she'd never bothered to find out, was where he was. Voss had grown up in Dayton, Ohio, the second son of a man who fixed HVAC systems for a living, and a mother who kept the books for 3 different small businesses out of the spare bedroom. They were not rich. They were not poor. They were the kind of people who knew the difference between needing something and wanting it, and raised their boys to understand that distinction before they could ride a bike. By the time Voss was 32, he had built something from scratch that most people spend their whole careers dreaming about. A logistics software company, started in a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus, grown into a firm with clients across 14 states. He'd sold it at 38 for $61 million after taxes, quietly, to a private equity group out of Denver. And then he had done something that confused everyone who heard about it. He walked away, not retired to a beach, walked away. Just left. No press release, no LinkedIn post, no victory lap. He transferred the money into a set of accounts managed by a man named Hargreave in Cincinnati, who had been his father's accountant, and who Voss trusted more than anyone he'd ever met in business. And then he took a job driving a delivery route for a regional freight company called Belton Transport. Why? He'd been asked that question exactly twice, once by Hargreave, once by his brother, and his answer was the same both times. "Because I want to find out who shows up when there's nothing to show." His brother had laughed. Hargreave had not said anything at all, which meant he understood. That was 4 years ago. In those 4 years, Voss had met Renee at a fundraiser for the community center where her sister volunteered. She was bright and funny and sharp, and she had a way of cutting through small talk that he liked immediately. They dated for 11 months. He told her he worked for Belton Transport. She told him that was fine, that she didn't care about money, that what mattered was who a person was. He had believed her. He had been wrong. The first year was good, or good enough. They got married in a small ceremony in April. 14 people. Her mother cried. His brother gave a toast that was mostly embarrassing and completely sincere. They moved into a rental house in a neighborhood that was not fashionable, but was decent. And Voss thought, this is real. This is something worth knowing. The second year, the complaints started. Small ones at first. The house was too small. The car was embarrassing. Her friends from the hospital, Renee worked in medical billing, were all going to Marco Island for spring break, and she couldn't go because they couldn't afford it. Voss listened and said nothing, and paid the bills that needed paying, and took extra shifts when he could. The third year, she stopped pretending she was okay with it. "You are almost 40 years old," she said one night, sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine she'd brought home from a work event. "And you drive a truck." "I do," he said. "Don't you want more than this?" He thought about the accounts in Cincinnati. He thought about Hargreave's quarterly reports, sitting unread in a folder on his phone. He thought about what more meant to her and what it meant to him, and how those two definitions had apparently never been the same. "I have what I need," he said. She looked at him like he was a stranger. Emma was born 14 months into the marriage, which was earlier than they'd planned. And the one thing Voss knew with complete certainty from the first moment he held her was that she was the truest thing in his life. Not the money, not the work he'd built, not anything that had come before. Emma. She had his eyes, and Renee's stubbornness and a laugh that started somewhere deep and came out like a surprise every time, like she couldn't believe something was that funny. She was 4 years old now, and she called him Daddy in a way that made the word sound like it meant something specific and permanent. He drove her to preschool every morning before his shift. They listened to the same 3 songs on repeat. She had strong opinions about playlists, and she asked him questions the whole way that he answered as honestly as he could. Daddy, why is the sky different colors in the morning? Daddy, do fish get cold? Daddy, what happens when something breaks and you can't fix it? That last one she'd asked about her stuffed rabbit, which had lost an ear. He'd sewn it back on that night after she was asleep. He thought about it differently later. Renee met Holland at her company's annual compliance conference in downtown Cincinnati. Voss knew this because she told him, unprompted, when she got home, mentioned that she'd had dinner with some colleagues, that a man named Holland had been really interesting to talk to, that he was a director at an insurance firm and had actually been to places, which was a phrase she used to mean, unlike you. Voss said that sounded nice. Over the next 4 months, she mentioned Holland with increasing frequency and decreasing effort to be casual about it. He was in town. They'd had coffee. He'd sent her a book she'd mentioned. He had a place in Hilton Head. Voss watched and said nothing. He was not angry, or rather, he was angry in the way a person gets angry when they realize they've been running an experiment, and the results have come back, and the results are not what they hoped for, but are exactly what they feared. He called Hargreave in November. I need you to do something for me, Voss said. What kind of something? I need the Dayton portfolio moved into a structure that's clear and documented. And I need the numbers on everything, organized, ready to be explained to a family court judge if it ever comes to that. There was a pause. Are you sure? Hargreave said. I'm sure, Voss said. And I need it done quietly. That's how I do everything, Hargreave said. The papers were still on the kitchen table. Renee was watching him with an expression he'd cataloged over the years. A specific tightening around the eyes that meant she'd already decided how this conversation ended and was simply waiting for him to catch up. Holland, Voss said. She didn't flinch. This isn't about Holland, okay. It's about the fact that I have spent 6 years waiting for you to become something and you haven't. I cannot keep doing this, Voss. I can't keep pretending that this is enough. He looked at Emma's drawings on the refrigerator. A sun with too many rays. A dog they didn't own. The 2 of them, stick figures, holding hands, labeled in uneven letters. Daddy and me. What about Emma? He said. We'll work out a schedule. She'll be fine. Kids are resilient. The words came out rehearsed. He recognized that too. She'd said them to herself enough times that they'd stopped feeling like something that needed to be reconsidered. He picked up the papers. He didn't read them. He just looked at the front page for a long moment, the way a person looks at something they already know the shape of. Then he set them back down. I'll have my attorney call yours, he said. Renee blinked. She had expected a fight, maybe tears, some version of him begging. He watched her recalibrate and then nod, smoothing the front of her jacket. That would be best, she said. She was out the door by 7:15. What happened next did not happen overnight, though it might have appeared that way to people watching from the outside. The truth was that everything Voss set in motion over the following 72 hours had been quietly prepared for months, the way a river carves its path long before the flood comes. He called Hargreave first. It's time, he said. I figured, Hargreave said. I'll make the calls. By that afternoon, the restructuring was underway. By Thursday, 2 local news outlets had picked up a story about the return of the founder of a logistics software company, now operating under a new venture that had quietly acquired a controlling stake in 3 warehousing and distribution companies across southern Ohio. The story named Voss. It included his photograph. It listed, without editorializing, the size of the holdings. His coworker at Belto Transport saw it first, sent it to the group chat with 3 question marks. Then, 11 more people sent it. Then Voss's route supervisor called him into the office with the expression of a man who was not sure whether to shake someone's hand or apologize. Is this you? The supervisor said, holding up his phone. That's me, Voss said. You've been driving Route 7 for 4 years. I have. The supervisor looked at him for a long time. Why, he finally said. To find out if I still knew how, Voss said. He wasn't being glib. He meant it exactly. The custody hearing was 3 weeks later. Renee arrived with Holland, who sat in the back of the courtroom in an expensive coat, and the posture of someone used to rooms where things were decided. Renee's attorney was polished and prepared, and had clearly done her homework on what she believed to be a delivery driver's modest finances. She was operating with outdated information. Voss's attorney was a woman named Pressler who had represented 2 Fortune 500 executives in family court proceedings and who had, in Hargreaves' words, never lost anything that mattered. She was not flashy. She was precise. She laid out, methodically and without drama, the full picture of Voss's financial situation, his involvement in Emma's daily life, his documented record as a present and capable parent, and the fact that he had, for 4 years, maintained a stable home, consistent routine, and primary caregiving role while working full-time. Renee's attorney asked Pressler, at one point, whether it was not concerning that her client had concealed significant assets during a marriage. Pressler pointed out, mildly, that the assets had been established before the marriage, were documented, and disclosed in the prenuptial agreement Renee had signed, and that nothing had been concealed so much as not volunteered. The courtroom was very quiet for a moment. Mrs. Calloway signed a prenuptial agreement, the judge said. She did, Your Honor, Pressler said. In March, prior to the April wedding, she had independent counsel review it. Renee's face did something complicated. Voss looked at the table in front of him. He was not enjoying this. That surprised people later, when they heard about it. They expected him to have relished the reversal. The moment when the room understood what had actually been happening all along. But he didn't feel that. He felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour, and he felt something close to grief. Not for Renee, exactly, but for the version of this that had never been possible, the version where what she'd told him at the beginning had been true. Primary physical custody was awarded to Voss. Renee received generous visitation. The judge noted, for the record, that Emma appeared to have a strong and healthy attachment to her father, and that continuity of that relationship was in the child's best interest. There's a particular kind of mourning that comes after a long season of waiting. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like victory. Not exactly. It feels more like the moment when you've been holding your breath for so long you've forgotten what air tastes like, and then suddenly you remember. Voss had that morning on a Tuesday in early March, driving Emma to preschool in the same car he'd driven for 6 years. A 2017 Civic with a dent in the rear bumper and a cracked console he'd covered with a strip of electrical tape. Emma was in the back seat eating a piece of toast, which she was not supposed to eat in the car, and she was singing quietly to herself, something that was not quite any real song, but had a melody that kept circling back to the same 3 notes. Daddy, she said. Yeah, bugged Mrs. Tremblay said, we're doing a project about our families next week. We have to bring pictures. We can do that. Can we use the one from the beach? They had gone to Lake Erie the previous July, just the 2 of them, and stayed in a cabin that had an unreliable water heater and a view that made everything else irrelevant. There was a photograph from that trip. Voss had no idea who'd taken it, some stranger he'd asked. Of the 2 of them at the water's edge, Emma on his shoulders, both of them squinting into the light, both of them laughing at something already forgotten. Yeah, he said. We can use that one. She went back to humming. He merged onto the expressway. People talked, of course. In the weeks after the story ran, Voss became a minor curiosity in the kind of circles he'd once moved through and had quietly removed himself from. Former colleagues reached out. Business reporters called. Renee's friends, who had spent years exchanging sympathetic looks about her husband, the truck driver, went through a visible and collective reassessment. Holland disappeared from the picture so quickly and completely that it was almost impressive. Renee called Voss once, 2 weeks after the hearing. He let it go to voicemail. Her message was 12 seconds long and said, essentially, that she thought they should talk. He did not call back. He was not cruel about it. He was not anything about it. It was simply a door that had been closed from the inside. His brother came down from Cleveland the first weekend in March, and they sat on the back porch with beers even though it was 40 degrees out, which was a thing they had always done since they were teenagers, and which no amount of monies or circumstance had managed to change. "So," his brother said. "So," Voss said. "You good?" Voss thought about it honestly, the way his brother had always expected him to. "Getting there," he said. His brother nodded like that was the right answer. There is a thing that happens to children who are raised by a parent who chooses to show up. Not just financially, not just logistically, but actually shows up, pays attention, remembers the details, and the thing that happens is not always visible right away. It accretes, like sediment, like the slow and patient building of something that cannot be rushed. Emma was 4. She did not know what her father was worth in the way the world tallied worth. She knew that he came to her classroom on the days he was supposed to come. She knew that when she woke up from a bad dream, there was a particular knock. 3 soft ones, before he opened the door. She knew that he kept her drawings, even the ones that weren't good, and that when she asked him a question, he actually tried to answer it, instead of telling her to go watch TV. She knew that the beach photograph was in a frame on his desk, not in a folder on a phone. These are small things. They are also everything. Voss did not become a different person when the money became visible again. This was the part that confused people who were expecting a transformation, the part where the ordinary man reveals himself to be secretly extraordinary and changes accordingly. He did not buy a new car. He kept the apartment through the spring while the house he'd quietly purchased 18 months earlier, a 4-bedroom in the suburb where Emma's preschool was, finished its renovation. He did hire a better plumber for the leaking faucet in the rental. That felt like enough. He went back to work, but different work. The kind that required him to be in rooms where decisions were made and to have opinions about those decisions. He was good at it. He had always been good at it, but he scheduled his hours around Emma's school day with an exactness that initially baffled his new staff, who were used to executives whose children existed primarily as photographs on a credenza. "I leave at 3, Voss told his operations director on the first day. "Every day. Non-negotiable. 4? Pickup." The operations director absorbed this. "And if there's something urgent, then it'll still be urgent at 4:15, Voss said. "I found most things are. The preschool family project happened on a Friday." Voss sat in a small plastic chair designed for a person a third his size, in a classroom that smelled like tempera paint and crackers, and watched Emma stand in front of a poster board she'd made with exactly the level of assistance he'd provided, which was to hand her the tape when she asked for it. The poster had the beach photograph in the center, slightly crooked, which she had decided was fine. Around it, in her uneven letters and her teacher's supplementary handwriting, were words Emma had chosen herself. "He makes my lunch. He comes to pick up. He knows my favorite song. He fixed my rabbit." Voss looked at that last one for a long time. When Emma turned to find him in the audience, she spotted him immediately, which she always did, and she waved with the particular enthusiasm of someone who has been waiting to do exactly that. He waved back. The teacher, a woman named Mrs. Tremblay, who had seen a lot of family projects over 15 years of teaching, told him afterward that it was one of her favorites. He thanked her. He wasn't sure what else to say. On the drive home, Emma was quiet for a while, which was unusual enough that he glanced in the rearview mirror to check on her. She was looking out the window, thinking about something. "Daddy," she said finally. "Maddie's mom said you're famous now." He hadn't expected that. "Famous is a big word," he said carefully. She said, "You're rich." "I have enough," he said. "We have enough." Emma considered this. She was 4 years old, and she had her father's eyes and her mother's stubborn precision, and she was not going to let this go on a technicality. "But like, a lot of enough?" she said. He laughed, really laughed, the kind that catches you off guard. "Yeah, bug," he said. "A lot of enough." She seemed satisfied with that. She went back to looking out the window. They drove the rest of the way home with the radio off, the evening coming down soft and gray over the expressway. Emma humming her formless song in the back seat, and Voss thinking about nothing in particular, or everything, spread thin enough to feel like nothing, and the city opening up around them the way it always did at this hour, all its lights coming on one at a time, like something ordinary slowly deciding to be seen.